Hi, everyone. My name is Kyra. As you know, I'm the organizer here at Higher Heights, the political home for Black women. We promote Black women running for office up and down the ballot for Congress, for president, for Senate, and then for mayor in our top 100 cities. We are doing our summer series this today. You have been joining us every Wednesday. We've discussed civics, equity building. Last week, we had a really great conversation with Conscious Lee about bridge building between men and women. A lot of great feedback on that. So thank you for meeting with us again on Wednesday. We've also discussed voting rights, but today we're discussing something that's super important. We're discussing protecting yourself online, Black women's digital defense. In a time with AI, deep fakes, hacking, things can be a little crazy and a little confusing. And so we are making sure that you know how to best to stay protected online. So we have a cybersecurity expert here, Roslyn Smith. I'm going to let her in to tell you a little bit more about herself and to tell you how to protect yourself online. Roslyn should be coming on now. Hi, Roslyn.
Hey there. Good evening. Thank you so much for the warm welcome. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Absolutely. For those who don't know me, my name is Roslyn Smith. I'm the chief strategist at RJ Strategies. I started my consulting firm after working in digital strategy for over 10 years in the financial industry, but I've always had a passion for politics and a passion for issues that impact Black women. So I feel really at home tonight and incredibly just grateful and blessed to be here with all of you.
Thank you. Um, just tell us a little bit about about why it's important to stay safe online.
Whew. Well, I tell you this. What's so interesting when I think about tonight's topic, right? Digital defense. When we talk about online, online is another representation of our image and our likeness, right? It's like what your footprint is online speaks to what your reputation is. And so, in the same ways that we look at history and say, okay, the image of Black women has been distorted or stereotyped or put out there in a negative light, right? There were different mediums to do that way back when. And so as the tools and technology have evolved, the methodology has just kept pace, right? It's the same spirit, it's just a different way of doing it. And what's interesting about this modern era is that when we think about false narratives, those things tend to be able to travel faster than they did, once upon a time. So, it's really important that we uphold the image that we want to be in the world and how we feel about ourselves, and that we're protecting ourselves from bad actors. Because I think as we look at organizations like Higher Heights, right, we have an infrastructure that's bringing us into the room, right? We're in the seats, we're at the decision making table. And so, with more power and influence, there's always going to be someone or some force out there trying to up the ante to knock us off of our game. Oh, I'm sorry.
We are about to go ahead and get started, so we'll launch into the training.
Sure thing. So, spoiler, we're here to talk about cybersecurity, AI, digital defense. Let's just jump right into the next slide.
One second. I am gonna do it this way. Easier. Here we go.
Perfect, perfect. So, as we kind of started talking about in our brief introduction, we're in a different landscape, right? We have some of the same, I would say, human triggers and behaviors, but different tools and methodology. And as we are building our professional lives and our personal lives and integrating with the technologies of our time, we just need to make sure that we're doing it in a mindful way. So, out of tonight's session, you're going to get some information, right? And you're going to get some tools and resources that you can leverage to help you navigate the digital landscape that we're in. So let's go to the next slide. So again, I think that Black women are prime targets for coordinated harassment, right? We know that false information spreads fast. Even people who, or sources that we always thought of as being reputable, are trying to move at a pace that is not human, right? We're all trying to move at this machine pace. And so as a result, information that may have been more heavily vetted in the past is getting out there, and it's seen by millions of people before fact checkers have been able to even catch up with what that narrative is. And so I think there's an old expression about an ounce of prevention is better than a pound of cure, right? And so we're going to look at tonight the things that we can control. There are some things we just can't in the landscape that we're in, but I think we can just get right into the nuts and bolts of it. Next slide, please. So why does this even matter, right? I know that when we talk about digital, cybersecurity, AI, these concepts, depending on where you are on the spectrum of digital literacy, they can sound like abstract ideas. So I want to talk about it in a way where we're able to bring it home as an example of how some of these new tools and technologies have been used against our own interests. So, for example, in the New Hampshire primary during the presidential race, there was a very shady consultant who used an AI tool to replicate President Biden's voice, and robotic calls went out to voters telling them not to vote in the primary. So if you kind of just practice some radical empathy right now, put yourself in the position of a voter that's answering your phone when it rings, and you think you're hearing the president's voice, right? So that comes with a level of authority and influence and organic trust. And so that is something that could influence people to not exercise their right to vote because they've been given misinformation or been dissuaded in such a kind of sinister way, right? And so the good thing I can say about that specific consultant and scenario is that um, they are facing some pretty hefty charges and consequences in that case. So another real world example very recently with Congress member AOC, she was featured in an artificially created or generated image of just making comments that were, I would say, maybe extreme, what would be considered extreme left, like in the spectrum of politics in this country, right? And so we had a reputable um, news outlet responding to this artificially generated image of her saying things that she never actually said, right? And so it's imperative that we don't knee jerk react to things and kind of do a little bit of fact checking um, before reacting or just believing what we see on the surface. And because technology is moving at such a rapid pace, unfortunately, but also fortunately, right, we now have to put a lot of guardrails around it. And I think government is at a place where it's catching up to do some things from a regulatory perspective and a judicial perspective. So we can look at recent legislation within Pennsylvania that is looking to dissuade the what we're calling now digital forgery. And hopefully through legislation like that and other geographies, learning from how that law operates and its efficacy, we'll see a crackdown in people using these technologies in a manner that it was really never intended to be used. And so, next slide, please. So again, we have AI driven disinformation, false images, right? We have bad actors, right? Who hasn't listened to or read the news in the past 5 years and not heard about foreign actors taking an interest in the elections of the United States, right? So now there are people far beyond our waters that are online doing things to dissuade people or to make it appear that public opinion is leaning a certain way when in fact it's not. And again, we have a lot of targeting of our identity and of people of color, with some of these images that are not even real. And we're moving at such a rapid pace. So we need to get with the fact that there are some things we're not going to be able to control, but we're going to be able to be um, vigilant. Oh, I just saw a comment. Yes, the ad was very horribly done. To anyone who is digitally literate, but we're going to get into some platforms and tools that can help some of us who may not have an eye for giveaways about when something is fake, like maybe tools that you can use to just check something before you believe it or run with it. Next slide, please. So want to look at this case study with Stacey Abrams during the 2018 gubernatorial race, right? She was, I would say, at I guess, the very beginning of when we started to see more of these sophisticated technology-driven attacks. But what I profoundly respect about her leadership and the work that was done in Georgia was that they had done so much grassroots organizing and having their ear and people on the ground that anytime there was a false narrative that came out, the community was tight knit enough to be able to debunk it quickly, right? But if you are in organizing and you're only online or you're only using certain channels, you're not going to be able to get ahead of things. We still have to do community organizing and coming together and call each other when things come out so that there can be a consensus from the community like, hey, this is fake, right? And I think one of the strategies I always recommend to candidates is make sure you have your A team in terms of who are your community stakeholders and allies that have platforms that are influential, that if and when there is some sort of disinformation campaign, that these figures are people that you can call on speed dial to respond and say, this is fake, or this is a lie, or this is not real. So we're going to go to the next slide. And then second case study around Kamala Harris and both the 2020 and the 2024 campaign. This is so challenging to talk about, right? There were a lot of attacks on Vice President Harris just based on her identity, whether she's really Black or not, and so forth. But what I really also appreciate about the way that she organized and the teams that she had put together, there was a counter narrative, right? And so when people or platforms or these bad actors were out here trying to say that she's not Black, right? Or she never identified as Black, or she just became Black, there were platforms and people who were able to respond and say, no, here are the pictures of her. This is her with her family in Jamaica, go into the river or something. Like, so I think, again, digital is an amazing tool, but we still have to be connected as humans so that when these type of attacks start in cyberspace, we're able to call each other and say, hey, no, let's all set the record straight and kind of have that information ready to go. I mean, what is, kind of a double-edged sword is some of the attacks that come against Black women, most of them are not new. So a lot of times we kind of know what they're going to say. We kind of know that they're going to try to paint us as either aggressive or do some sort of character assassination and so forth. So it would behoove us if we know that and they're using, a 1925 playbook in 2025 in terms of narrative development, then we should just already have the counter campaign ready to go. Exactly. Yeah, I'm just looking at some of these comments. Exactly. So we're going to go to the next slide. So, okay, we know this bad stuff is happening. What do we do about it? Right? I would say number one is to own your digital presence just as much as you own your physical personhood, right? And so if you are consistent in how you show up on an Instagram and a Facebook and other platforms, then it's easier for people to spot when something is off brand about an image or a narrative that is being pushed, right? If in a campaign context, I would say be mindful of the platforms that you're using for communication, right? You know, practice some due diligence around like I would say, go through your information in terms of, hey, these are the different areas of your campaign. Think about what needs to be the most secure and only give people access to the information that they need as a part of the area of the campaign that they're working on. Also, again, we're moving at a pace that is not human at this point in time in the world. So pause when you see something that is triggering, whether it be an image, an article, or hear some sort of audio. And there's nothing that beats a good old fashioned Google search, right? Yes, there can be disinformation on Google in your search results. But here's what's interesting. If I go and Google a fake story, either it might not come up, or if it does come up, you'll start to see inconsistencies that let you know, like, this might not pass the smell test. This might not be real. And you've figured that out in less than a couple of minutes just by just kind of going through and just perusing through Google. You can use some common sense to recognize when something just isn't up to snuff, right? And then, as painful as it is, sometimes we got to practice good um, password hygiene, right? And I know everything has a password now. And I know that you feel like you got to remember a bunch of them. And I know it's tempting sometimes to use the same password across multiple things. But we're going to get into some tools and rules that you can use that can help you not only come up with passwords, but manage them effectively based on whatever your risk tolerance is and what the password is too. So we're going to move to the next slide. So looking at some tools and platforms that you can use. And I know this one is controversial, Signal, right? We're unlike certain people, we're not going to be putting war plans and highly, deeply secure information in Signal. But for those of us that are just in the campaign trenches or, um, working on an internal team on things that don't have an impact on, national security, we can use Signal, right? Safely. And no, you exactly. We're not putting classified info on there. And then there are email platforms like Proton Mail that is heavily encrypted. So you just get more privacy in terms of things that you're sharing back and forth. And I'm sure there are some other consultants on the line now. So sometimes Proton Mail is really good when you're engaging with journalists and kind of in the throes of a campaign and trying to get information where it needs to go. There are platforms also like Wire where you can communicate and Keybase. There are verification tools. So, for example, if you see an image that you think is triggering or it's bothersome or people are talking about it, it's causing some sort of controversy, you can look at into TinEye, just copy paste or upload it to there and it can do an authenticity check for you. And then their InVid can do checks on videos that may have been AI generated. And so it can kind of give you an assessment of what's the likelihood of this being a real video versus an artificially generated um, video. And then one of the best practices that I use in my personal life and I strongly recommend in campaign, work, because I would say using virtual account numbers, right? I think the less that you give out any type of financial information, the better. And so I just wanted to highlight that as a best practice. And it would be worthwhile for you to look into whether your debit or credit card provider, whether it's your personal account, whether it's a campaign account, if they have a virtual account number or a virtual card service, and to understand the features that are available, because depending on who the provider is, let's say if one virtual card number was compromised, leading to an account, you can literally regenerate a new virtual account number, right? So you don't have to stop the campaign or do something crazy because somebody somewhere hacked and got the real card number or got one of the virtual card numbers. It kind of gives you more control over information. And we all know that in order to mobilize people and do campaigns, whether it's ad and media buying, um, either giving supplies to volunteers, whether it's print work, all these things that go into a campaign, it costs money. And so we want to make sure that, we're protecting those assets, especially when we think about a lot of our Black women and other people of color who rely on um, donations, right? We want to safeguard those funds that have been allocated. So go to the next slide. Getting into some of the more advanced tools, some of this information won't appear new. What's interesting about our modern world and technology is a lot of times things are just thrust on us. So we're learning it. Um, I guess they used to call it what baptism by fire, right? So one day you log into Facebook, you're using it. Then a month later, you're trying to log in and it wants to send you a text message or go through some other verification process. If you're active and engaged online in any way, you've probably already seen multi-factor authentication. But what's not said enough is that you have the ability to go to MFA providers and enable it like across different platforms or even personal things that you use. So it would be worth looking into like Google Authenticator. In the private sector, we used Microsoft Authenticator a lot. It's just another way of just making sure people are accessing information that they should be accessing, right? And I know to those of us who are just trying to do our jobs or get things done, sometimes it feels annoying, but I'll tell you, I can vividly remember sometimes out of nowhere getting a text message because someone was trying to log into one of my platforms. And I think the more engaged you are in advocacy, the more you'll be targeted for um, someone trying to compromise your account or to tear down your platform. And so, you know, if we know that comes with the territory, right? When we shine a light on an issue, if it draws people wanting to compromise our platforms, then we just adjust to that reality and enable the tools that are available to us. I can't say enough good things about VPN providers. I love VPN. And for those of you who don't know, it just gives you more privacy, right? So before, let's say you had your laptop and you went to Starbucks or Dunkin' Donuts or another cafe or anywhere where you're using internet, right? And you're just online with your laptop, you're in the Wi-Fi doing your thing, right? There are footprints throughout the internet and through the servers that whatever that establishment is, that kind of logs, where you've been, and it can trace back to your particular device. So what VPN does, it enables you to be a little bit more anonymous and to have some more privacy, um, especially around your devices and what your activity is online, right? And it's not to say that you're doing something improper or negative, but there are bad actors out there that are able to data mine and use information to compromise your accounts and to do things that are bad. And then also another thing that I think is a really practical tool that we can all do, especially if you're in the advocacy campaign space, is use email aliases, right? If you've ever worked campaign or near anyone in a seat of power, you're gonna get lots and lots of emails about many different things. You may even start to receive spam. You may receive phishing attempts where it looks like a legitimate email, but then you click it and then now your device or something else is compromised, right? So an email alias kind of just helps filter a little bit, right? You go to your email provider, you create like an alternate address that will forward to your real email account. And if you start to see that, hey, this alias has gotten so out there that I'm getting all kinds of crazy stuff. Yes, to this question, I think you should always use a VPN when you're out in public. Um, I use Express VPN religiously. I know that for most of these, sometimes there's a free version, sometimes there's a nominal fee. I am a daughter of the Caribbean, so now that I don't work certain places, yes, Express VPN. Now that I don't work certain places anymore, I'm not afraid for my IP location to be known because I'm not in corporate anymore. But that was one of the things that I did. I would always use my VPN so that I could um, so everyone wasn't in my business. So yes, oh yes, Brave is also another one. That's awesome. Awesome. Yes. So I recommend using a VPN. I even use VPN when I'm at home. And also, there's an element of common sense to this, right? So if you're at home and maybe you're trying to do something online that's super personal, and because of your VPN, you think um, that your VPN might make it look like you're a computer because it anonymizes you, and maybe for certain activities online it doesn't want to let you in. Then you have the option to toggle it on and toggle it off. You just kind of have to get into those digital hygiene habits, and will become second nature. And let's go to the next slide. And so, to everyone's favorite topic, passwords. And I know there's folks that are probably screaming and I can't hear them because I'm on Zoom, right? When you see that you should use 12 to 16 characters, right? But it's true, because you don't want a password that people can easily guess, right? And if you're one of those folks that uses the same password across multiple platforms and devices, once someone has your real email, right, and not your alias, and they've figured out your password, now they're taking your real email and a password that they know, and maybe going to multiple sites and trying to log in. So again, all these things kind of, they complement each other. So make sure you have a strong password, and think about it in terms of formulas so that it doesn't feel as cumbersome. So if you know that you have your favorite airport, let's say your favorite airport is Newark Airport, and you know what that airport code is, right? You can use your airport code plus a common phrase, maybe trying to think what would be a good common phrase that's not on the screen. Like, I don't know, maybe you just have something, a phrase that you grew up with. So you just do a combination of things that mean something or have familiarity to you that someone could not easily catch on with. And then put in a number, symbol, and unless someone is a mind reader, they're really not going to be able to guess it. And if you're looking at the Zoom and you're saying, well, that's too much. I'm on too many things and I got too many passwords as it is to be coming up with formulas. Think about your risk tolerance across what you're using, right? In my opinion, website that I go to and do online banking, I put in a very different risk profile than the website where I order tea or get body butter, right? So we can use common sense in the sense that, hey, if it's just for something that you don't see as a major threat, maybe you can look at using one of the password managers for information that is highly sensitive or that would be detrimental if someone compromised it. Maybe you want to use a formula and come up with a rhythm, like a poem or a rhyme or something to help you, remember what it is. And then with every tool, I would say, just take the time, look on YouTube, look online. Every tool has its pros and its cons in terms of how it's used, right? And what you're using it for. But just have something in place, have some sort of structure in place, so that at your fingertips, right, you kind of know what you need to do in order to access the things you need to access without being frustrated. And then one thing that I enjoy using a lot, I love biometrics. I still have um, my one of my two of my laptops actually, still I could use my fingerprint to unlock it. I'm a Windows person, but I also am in the Apple and Mac ecosystem. So there are certain things you can set up. Like, so for example, if I have on my Apple Watch, the computer may respond to the fact that, okay, the person who's using this also happens to have on that Apple Watch that I also have like a code to. So, maybe the code to my Apple Watch might help me get into my MacBook when I need it to. And I would say always have kind of like systems, like say if one fails or if you just really can't remember, just have a way of getting to the information because I feel like life has a way of just moving on you, right? And you want to kind of have these things in place before you actually need them. Next slide, please. So, speaking of life moving on you just never know when crisis is going to hit, right? I have family that loves me dearly. They used to say that I was fear mongering when I would express concern about different things, but I don't know about any of you. As we look at our world, some of the natural disasters and things that have been coming up, all the doomsday fear mongering people are having their moment right now, and that includes me. But when it's not about something as catastrophic as a storm, and we're talking just about campaign work and crisis response, I would say the best thing you can do is to have fire drills, right? If you have your core team or people that you're working with, or if, even if you're working solo, you just think to yourself, okay, in this scenario, I am going to call this person. And when I call this person, do they know what to do, right? Do we have a shared chat on Signal or a secure workspace online that enable us to collaborate when something is happening and we need to address it? I would say do not succumb to the pressure to respond without properly vetting what you're doing. I understand there is such thing as rapid response, right? And that's important. However, give yourself a moment to get grounded before you respond to anything and make sure that you have your plan and that you feel grounded in the decision that you're making or the direction that you're going to counter whatever's happening. So my belief is if you stay ready, you don't have to get ready. And then next slide, I would say this QR code will lead you to a worksheet that can help you think about where you are in a tangible manner because you come to a webinar and people give you a lot of information and it feels like an awesome discussion and then you go back to your actual life. So this worksheet will kind of help you think through what are my actionable next steps? Where am I on top of my game? Where do I maybe need to make some tweaks and put some infrastructure in place to make sure that I'm practicing due diligence? So feel free to download and leverage it however you want to leverage it. If you find it useful and you decide you want to share it with other people, then that's fine too. Next slide, please. Or I guess people, I don't know, Kyra, I guess we'll give out the
Yeah.
presentation.
We'll
Okay,
give out the presentation, but we're gonna sit on this for about maybe a minute or two. You can just type in the chat when you have download when you got it. It should be like a little Google form. And then I'll also try to drop it in the chat for you. But yeah, just use the chat function and let us know. And then while we wait, Rosalind, we have one question about digital cards that I want to get to.
sure.
Um, she said, oh, she has a couple of questions. Okay, but we can get to this like at the towards the very end, but we'll do this right now. She had two questions. She said, are virtual credit card numbers available for personal credit cards as well?
Yes, they are.
Okay. Yeah, I know that Capital One and Bank of America, I told her that they also have them, at least in my experience. And then another question while we wait, we're gonna answer these two questions and then move on. How do you feel about people getting their own home servers as a way to gain control of internet presence? What are some good, reliable sources that provide guidance about managing home servers?
That is a very interesting question. And it would be quite an investment for someone to make. I would say it that depends. it really depends on the level that you're operating on. I would say most people can create a structure, an ecosystem such that they are practicing good cyber hygiene and don't necessarily need their own server, right? But I know that in the higher heights community, there are a lot of consultants, right? And people who are working with digital advocacy organizations, working with elected officials um, that are targeted because of their mission and their purpose and their messaging. And so if as a consultant or someone who knows that you are dealing with highly sensitive information or you're doing this at a level, you're, you know, Olivia Pope level with it, then yeah, maybe investing in your own server is a worthwhile investment. In terms of vetting the sources available, I would love the opportunity to get back to that person. I actually think I have my email address on one of these slides or something like that, because I don't want to say a brand that I haven't vetted myself or that I don't think is reputable. But I would say for anyone who is just living day to day, maybe volunteers, maybe works on campaigns, you shouldn't need one. But if you're a high level operator or you're expanding some type of business where you're dealing with highly sensitive and confidential information, then it may be a worthwhile investment.
And then we have, so I'm gonna like, I think people are having issues with the QR code. So I know I can pull that link once we're done. And so if you want to hang out for a little bit after the chat, I can pull that for you. And then towards the end of the series, we'll be sending everything out later. But if you have time to hang out for a little bit, I can just get that code for you. It's just kind of complicated to do with the Zoom room. Um, and then another question from Dominique. Any advice on removing personal contact info, such as address and phone number from the internet? A long lost family member said they used the US phone book to find me, and I was shocked to find my current address was available for free.
Yes, and it's true. And I am guilty. Once upon a time, I used to try to find family members. But I was trying to find them for the purpose of doing a family reunion. It was purely good intentions. But and because I saw that information was so readily available, I literally took some time. I would Google myself, I would see what came up. Every site where my information was, I had drafted a letter and or email asking to be removed from their website. So it's something that you have to request. Boy, oh boy, do I wish that the tools out there could somehow automate it. But some of these sites that are gathering this information, and a lot of them, they get it from telecom companies. Um, it's just out there, right? And so you do have to go to each individual one and ask them to please remove it. And it's a worthwhile exercise for privacy and safety, and especially for people who are activists, you want to make sure probably don't need everyone to know where you live.
And Jacqueline was really kind enough to put the link in the chat for everyone to look at. I'm gonna also paste it down here in case you lose it. If they don't have a Google account, how can they use that chat? That
Good question. Good question. Let me see. Let me see. I can probably see if I can post it in the chat. I will try to do that as we're
it says
still fielding questions.
IT question, like IT at work, and then I can go to the next slide. It's just your info. If that's okay.
Yep, that's totally fine.
All right. And so if you want to connect with Roslyn, you can use her LinkedIn. It's right here. Her email's here. You can use this QR code. Um, and I think she's trying to help figure out how to do the link if you don't have a Gmail account. But we have a couple minutes left. So if you have anything you want to add or any questions, I have some questions that I got. I'll stop sharing my screen right now and go back on camera. Hello. Um, but I think I've sent some questions to you, Roslyn, that we can ask that I can ask you.
Sure.
Um, Hold on, let me pull them up. But if you have any questions, please use that chat function or the QR code, the QR code or the Q&A function. Too many Q's today. Um, where did it go? Yeah, gotcha. Um, so some of the questions I wrote for you, what are some of the most common disinformation tactics used against women candidates today? I know you talked a little bit about what Kamala Harris went through and what Stacey Abrams went through, but like, what are some things that you're saying? Because I've seen, not even against candidates, I've just seen just like in general AI generated images of Black women being aggressive, being kind of crazy, and it looks very realistic. And so, I guess, what are some tactics that have been commonly used over the last like year or so?
I would say that what you're speaking to is like a gender bias compounded by um, racism, right? And so again, I think these it's really the attacks that are happening. They're just using modern tools to proliferate the same narratives that they've always have tried to push about Black women. And then when we specifically get into those of us who are advocates, that are people who run for office and that are change makers, right? There's emphasis on the person's perceived attitude and temperament and not policy, right? And even though she's not a Black woman, I remember vividly, even when Hillary Clinton was running, and there were so many conversations about her outfit. I mean, it would never stop. I'm like, I don't care what this woman is wearing today. I really don't. But during her campaign bid, that became front and center. So I think that gender bias has just found its way into the channels that we use. It's not like there's a special strategy per se. It's just kind of the same song, a different tune.
Okay. Here's another question. People are using AI and chat GPT constantly. I'm hearing about it 24/7. They're using it for recipes, for travel. It's unavoidable. How can we safely use things like chat GPT without putting ourselves at risk?
Um, Act like you have some common sense. And no, and I say, and I know I sound, like I'm being funny when I'm saying that, but here's my thing. I believe in using tools, right? I think AI or generative AI like ChatGPT is an incredible and a very strong tool and resource that can be leveraged to do a lot of different things. But there is actually a really cool video, and if I can find it, I want to put this in the chat. It is a former Google executive being interviewed on a podcast called Diary of a CEO. And in this like very engaging interview talking about AI, he makes it very clear. He said, AI is a child and we are the parents. So the outputs that we get are only as good as the inputs that we put into it, right? And so wanting everyone to just be mindful of, hey, if you have gone and you have done some research for yourself, like let's say if you're in academia and you've pulled articles or you've pulled research and you use AI to help you organize the information or to help you summarize the information that you have validated for yourself, then you're saving time and you're creating, an operational efficiency. The problem becomes where you think you can skip steps in terms of relying on this tool or platform to spoon feed you the information. And I have experimented with it a lot. And what I think is so funny, when, and a quick story, when the controversy started erupting over immigration, and there was a state senator from Maryland that went to El Salvador to try to meet with one of the detainees and so forth. And I remember I just was randomly in Chat GPT, and I, had asked a question about like, oh, what's the name of that state senator? And the name that it gave me back, I typed back to Chat GPT and I said, that's not his name. And then Chat GPT says, oops, yeah, you're right. So it's kind of, yeah, exactly. So it's almost like just have to use some common sense. You still have to be diligent. You're still going to have to read for yourself. You're still going to have to go and find it, primary sources and use all those tools that we learned in fourth and fifth grade. And you just kind of have generative AI as a tool to create efficiency. Now, two sides of the same coin. I know that it has helped people generate ideas, but you still have to research, you still have to vet. Like, for example, there's no way right now to validate whether information that it gives you back is copywritten, right? And so I rather take the extra few minutes to go make sure that something that maybe I did or collaborated with a generative AI tool with, that what it gave back to me is not someone else's intellectual property, because I rather not get a cease and desist in the mail, or I don't want to find out in an embarrassing forum that something that I took from some tool on the internet um, broke a copyright. And I hope that answered the question.
No, that answered the question perfectly. I think a lot of people are very scared and also very confused about ChatGPT, and like rightfully so. It is kind of scary and new, and so like it's nice to hear from the perspective of a Black woman how to use these tools, because I think a lot of times it is very like whitewashed, and so thank you for that. And then we have one question from Dominique Taylor. Are there any rules or laws that require someone to disclose when a photo, video, or any other content is AI generated?
Oh, you better believe it, because there have been incidents where there were attorneys that tried to use generative AI to create legal briefs. And I don't know if this is a good or a bad thing, but the American legal system is so complex that when you go through the brief, and if you have the legal mind and experience, you see glaring things that are just, it's not up to snuff. Like some of the case law that was cited was obviously wrong. And since those type of incidents, there are judges that have said, like, cannot, if you are in my courtroom, if you use AI to help you create anything, you need to disclose it. And then I also think that, again, government is still trying to catch up. So there is a very gray area here. I would say I expect there to be more regulation coming. And the analogy I'm going to use is social media. I remember when certain platforms like Twitter and Facebook first came out, and everyone felt like they were so fun and they were so awesome and this and that, and you could go viral. But if you notice, over time, all these little rules would just pop up, and that organic way of connecting online or that platform, it kind of lost some of its stickiness as it became more regulated. And I think that AI has the potential to end up going down a similar road if officials that are in power now start really catching up with it. And what is concerning to me as someone who's worked in at the intersection of like technology and business and all of that, I had a very difficult time sometimes trying to explain certain technologies to regulators or to people who are not digitally literate. And so my concern is that we may actually end up doing even more than what you're saying. I think we might end up throwing the baby out with the bathwater because you have people who maybe don't understand in the seat of a regulator or a legislator just trying to get ahead of what they see more through the lens of risk management than innovation. So,
And then we have one more question. And then if no one has any questions, we'll do a little bit of a wrap up. Sheree Gibson says, thinking about AI generated avatars of yourself, how do you or what do you recommend to protect your AI image in public spaces or being used for nefarious activities?
so the very fun fact about me is that I've had like a cease and desist template um in my files and like in my documents since I was in college. I never thought I'd be using them for AI generated images, but it's again another one of those very murky waters because we're all in this workshop tonight. If somebody took a screenshot of me and Kyra and put it into some tool and said, create such and such, how much of it can we ascertain or say, oh, well, they're using my essence? If it's almost, it goes back to how the controversy over the music industry and sampling, right? How close to a match does it have to be in order for someone to determine that, well, it's a duplicate, or you've used my essence, or you've used my intellectual property? I think we're still having those debates, but when it comes to AI, we are in some dark, uncharted waters.
Yeah, like I said, it's very new, very scary, but it doesn't have to be. And like I think conversations like this really help. I've learned a lot. I'm probably going to spend probably the next couple of days changing all my passwords. I was telling Jay and Ebony, our political director at VP of Political and Programming, that I've had the same password for a lot of my personal accounts since I was like 13. So let me go and change that. And I'm sure I'm not the only one. But I just want to say thank you so much, Roslyn, for this informative presentation. I know I've learned a lot. It feels like it has not been an hour, but thank you so much for all of this. Yeah, I'm gonna change it, sure. um, and I just want to say thank you guys for meeting with us every Wednesday. It's been super fun. Next week, we're going to be doing fundraising for political impact. So if you're trying to raise money to run for office, if you're just curious about fundraising, we'll be doing that tomorrow. I mean, not tomorrow, next Wednesday, same time. Please join, tell a friend. We hope to see you again soon. Thank you again, Roslyn. It's been just very fun, very informative. You guys have a wonderful rest of your night and a great weekend. Goodbye.
Thank you.
And I will end it for both of us. Bye, y'all.